Okay, you're back. You must have some kind of questions or thoughts or something. Some things. Do you have some things about Dharma or life or both? Yeah,
I have a really weird question.
a really good question.
No, a really weird question.
Oh, weird. We like weird. Yeah.
Who knows?
We specialize.
We'll be the judge of that.
Keep
Put that on the
Portland weird.
sign out front of the news center. Specializing in weird questions.
Weird Dharma questions. Please come here.
In the middle of this session tonight, I suddenly realized that I was hearing the last song that was on the radio when I was driving over here.
Oh, good.
And it wasn't like I was hearing myself hum it. I was hearing it as though it were playing in the room.
Wow.
And I was noticing it, and I was noticing the extent to which I was distracted by it. And then all of a sudden I thought, how many minds do I have in here? It feels like there are at least three separate things going on simultaneously. How is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
And which one is mind?
It's mind.
Mind. Mind.
Yeah.
Which one is awareness or what? Yeah. So any light you can shed on any of that would be appreciated.
Well, first, how many people have those similar kind of experiences?
That song's in my head all day, every day.
I mean, not just music, but then you've got awareness of the music, and then you've maybe got, I call it the little ticker tape that's going across the bottom with another story, like your TV screen's there. You're aware of the TV screen, then they're running those stories across the bottom that you kind of glance at every once in a while.
What did that just say?
They did what? So, oh gosh. Well, I can say one thing. There's a book called Mental Factors, 54 Mental Factors. It's a classic in the Gelug tradition. And there's 5 constant mental factors that are going all the time, and I only remember 3 of them. I really need to look back. But you can kind of get the gist off the 3. Attention. We always have attention going, even if it's dulled. Intention. We always have some kind of intention going. Attention, intention. It's something like focus. It's something like that. That's not the word, though. And awareness is always. You can't get away from awareness. But so there's also, so you could look at these other kind of mental factors are like mental factors that lead to suffering. I mean, they outline them all, like greed, envy, ignorance, attachment, factors that lead away from suffering, joy, concentration, like that. So all of that, I mean, there's, we aren't going to parse it down to 3. I mean, God, it's really complex. But the awareness is, I'm going to say this, but I don't know. It's like, it's that which within all the others are occurring. Because they come and go, except for the constant mental factors. And then those more constant mental factors, as we clear out and get closer to our Buddha nature, they also, it's not so like I have to put my motivation somewhere, I have to do this, I have to do that. But it's a very complex process. And then there's, the other piece of it, there's 6 mental factors. there's the five senses all flooding in. And there's like a thing called, let's take the sight, the one of sight. There's eye consciousness. There's the eye, which is just, the physical mechanism. There's the object, Sally. But there's eye consciousness inside the mind that has to be functioning. Because if my eyeball is just there and you're just there, without the consciousness, it's not going to happen. And the eye consciousness can't hear, and the hearing consciousness can't see. Fascinating. So there's five related to our five senses, and then there's the mental consciousness. So those are all feeding in. Then the mental consciousness is making stories about them. I like that song. I wish that song would go away. I'm going to watch that song, And then there's some kind of sampajana. The thing that, the part of the mind that goes, you're off the top, mindfulness, you're off the topic, you're lost in space, come back. That also, which I don't think in the all those discussion about mental factors, it's not just the pure awareness, it's kind of a more active thing that's watching. So Bill, probably, those are the jumble of things I know. They're not maybe so clear because I haven't studied it for a while.
So what do you want to do with this?
Good question.
This we said yes, you have 3.
We said, yes, you have 54.
You said no, it's not 3, it's 54. Then,
What difference does it make to
Why
you?
haven't you noticed the rest of it? That's what I want to do. Yeah, what do I want to do with it? I guess in my practice I have moments of real confusion about what it means to settle into awareness, to rest in awareness. When all of these bits and pieces are flying by, but even more than that, it's maybe it's really just that I have some discomfort, like when I have that experience of simultaneously multiple things going, it feels a little split personality to me, and my instant reaction is to try to figure out which one of them is me, but in an ultimate sense, which I know doesn't make sense as I say it out loud. Like, which one of these is the awareness I'll still have if I clear everything, settle everything else out. So I guess there's a kind of grasping, like it's gotten fragmented, and I'm wondering which of these things to identify with.
Who's on first?
All of which I recognize as absurd now that I say it out loud.
Do you? Yeah.
yeah, I mean it is, but the experience of kind of I have some sense of this experience of the confusion about it, almost kind of being sort of feeling like I'm onto something. Like I've noticed these things, and it's kind of confusing. So I'm sort of onto something with this being confusing, and so I get wrapped up in wow, what's going on, and then it's like oh, and then if I really kind of if I have to explain if I have to explain myself, then it's like oh, it's stuff happening.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
And then it's like, oh well, this thing that I didn't quite understand, but I thought I was kind of on the edge of understanding, and that if I did understand it, then it would be really something. That whole thing, that whole side of it, kind of falls apart. Stuff's happening.
You know, we've been talking, it fits with what we talked about yesterday and this morning about getting trapped on the cushion and off the cushion. So Bill's describing one trap. You've described it too. I'll figure this out. I see that and the song, and something's aware of the song, and I will figure out which one of these is the awareness. And it's a trap, because the only way, the method is described as keep letting go of those, the song, the figuring it out, the identifying one, and then calming, 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 and the awareness. Well, that's you can't even begin to get there if the mud is, you know, the thing up the glass of water with the mud all stirred up. Most of us are doing what you're doing. The mud's all stirred up, and we think we'll parse out the mud from the water and the, you know, but we aren't even calming enough for it to get clear. Does that make sense? So what's your object? I mean, the object of your meditation.
The object of my meditation tonight was the breath.
Okay. Where'd that go in all this?
I was aware of the breath.
Okay.
At the moment that I also became aware that this music was playing in my head.
Okay.
So I was sort of present with at least those two aspects of my experience. And then I did have a real sort of moment of how can all this be going on simultaneously, and what's what?
Yeah, good stuff.
And if you just actually rest in the middle of it, the how will actually become clearer and clearer in itself. Not the story about how, but the actual how. And that's the kind of I don't know if cognitive dissonance is the right word for this moment, but the kind of the dissonance, the mental dissonance of not quite understanding it, leads us to veer in the direction of getting a better story about it.
Right.
As opposed to just being there. And the breath's the middle of the. We've nominated the breath to be the kind of the middle of it's the breath's birthday party. So we're all paying attention. The middle of the stuff. We've nominated breath, experience breath, middle of the stuff. Okay, so, but then all this other stuff happens, and it just makes it. The breath being the middle of the stuff is supposed to make it simpler, just to kind of have some place to kind of mainly hang out while this other stuff, whatever else happens. And so just kind of relaxing in the middle of that.
Relax is big. So figuring out isn't relaxing. And what I'll notice, like I noticed tonight, at some point that I was just tightening slightly here. And that's when I'm headed that direction too. Like there's just kind of a slight tightening here in the body. And I go, I'm trying. I can feel trying starting up. But it seems like it's more identifiable in my body for me. Like that's my signal. Oh, my mind is trying too much here. Then just, And Lama Michael has said this many times, just relax the body more. And the more we relax the body deeply, the mind stops being so busy. I thought that wouldn't work the opposite way, but it actually, it relaxes. But thanks for being so vulnerable about like what's going on in there, you know, it's like.
It seems
Yeah.
to me that those times when I have that competing identities, that I think the problem is that those things they're catching me to a certain extent. So I am either, I don't know whether the word is identifying with them, I'm a person with a song in my head or whatever, or just say I'm being distracted by it enough that it sets up the dualism. Well, where's the awareness that's looking at the thing? Because well, it muddies the waters, so that even if I think, well, that's not my awareness, that's a song, you know, but what's looking at the song? Well, then there's the song again. So
And
it's,
where's the mind that asked the question?
can't-
Which mind is looking at the
Yeah.
song?
Yeah,
but in
too
those
much
states,
concept.
I can't
Yeah.
you know, I just have to go back to the object, and it's more like the times when I feel that I can be rest and awareness are unfortunately kind of rare. But when I can, it's not something I did. You know, I'm not doing that because I figured out which one it was.
Right.
It happened because I let go of that other stuff, and even if I'm aware of it, it didn't cause a division of, you know, it didn't make it didn't stick.
Didn't catch you.
It didn't stick, it just came and went, and but I can't, or, you know, I don't, it's not out of making the right
Yeah.
identification of where awareness was.
And one thing I'm using right now that is helping, I see I'm caught somehow, and I just say very quickly, am I willing to let go of this? And what I'm seeing is the power in doing that on the cushion and off the cushion. They complement each other so much. Like, okay, I'm stuck in a story. Am I willing to let go? I can see maybe it's kind of a very interesting story, like figuring out what part of the mind is going here. But if I say, am I willing to let go of this, and then I do it, something else happens. And it's like what Dora says, I'm not trying to make awareness happening. I'm just opening my trap. I'm hooked and I'm unhooking. That's all. I don't know what's going to happen next. There's no trying and no prediction. It's an untrying.
Right.
Yeah.
Experience without elaboration.
Yeah. But we're just so conceptual, it's so hard for us not to go conceptual, and then just to see it, like you saw all these pieces, you know, just see it and then let go.
You used the image of the water with the silt stirred
Yeah.
up. There is a way in which part of what we want special dispensation if we have this very, very, very special way of moving the spoon through the as long as we have it, you know, making this very precise 7-pointed star of movement through that's okay.
Yeah. Because we're trying to figure out the
Yes,
water and
yeah.
not rile it. But, yeah, it's impossible. Yeah, it's already right. Yeah. Yeah.
When Ringo Tupu was here, he said something, I loved what he said here, but there's one piece that really it's hard for me to grasp, or maybe I disagreed with, and I'm probably wrong, but I want to just get some thoughts on it. But one of the things you said was that in kind of more of a Western psychological view, the whole idea is to maybe move into the pain and like feel it, experience it, etc. Maybe even if it's negative, move into the negativity of it. And you know, as a therapist, I mean, that's a big part of my job, is to, not only for myself but for other people, help them move into past traumas or whatever it is. One of the things he was saying was that in the Eastern view is very different. Like the whole idea is to move into compassion, joy, mindfulness kind of thing, more of the being happy. And it almost struck me as, even how he was saying it almost sounded, from a Western view, that would sound very delusional. It's like, oh, you're just denying. Yeah, you're just denying what you're actually, the pain that you're experiencing is, by moving into the, maybe a for a measurable state or something. And I have thoughts in both camps, but I guess as I think about like my own struggles and my own pain, I could go either way, and maybe they're not mutually exclusive, but it feels like, do I move into the pain of the loss and really stay there and process it and experience it, or this thing of like more of a Mahayana thing of it's just something different. It's more like moving into like a bodhicitta state. And from a Western view, that would seem maybe denial.
Yeah, you know, this is really quite, you're not the first one to raise this, but the way I've experienced it, having done both therapy and Mahayana Buddhism for a while, that there's not really a big contradiction. So here's one question. What's the goal in therapy of moving into that pain, experiencing it? Is that the end goal?
No.
Okay, what's the goal then? Experience it in order to what?
Maybe let go of suffering, become happy, maybe as a simplified version.
So that's not so far from the Mahayana. Of course, Mahayana is not just the happiness of this life, but it includes the happiness of this life.
Yeah.
So I worked with this Buddhist therapist for a while, and she was trying to figure this out, you know. And she said, you know, one of the difficulties in Western therapy is there's some styles, or, you know, Western therapy is as different as, you know, as you can say, Buddhism. It's like it's one monolith. So, but she said some kinds of therapy drive the person into the suffering and make it more and more solid. Like, say, someone with PTSD. You want to make sure you're moving past it as a client and a therapist. You don't want to just, that's what you are, a person with PTSD.
You are.
You know, and now you've got a solid identity based on just suffering, you know. And so she was describing more and more therapists, like, yeah, you don't deny, you go in, but you go in to come out. And that takes a lot of skill. That's why you're trained and such. You know, like, where is that point? But, you know, my own journey through that was that I was with some therapists that it felt like just tell the story again, tell it again, and you're just like end up with a identity as a victim. And then working with her, it was like, no, we're moving through this. And now, those memories are just like, they don't have any hold on me whatsoever, because that's an interesting, strength-building situation. And believe me, there was no bypassing. You know, it was exceedingly painful going through. But I think someone who holds you're going through is different. So I'm not saying they're exactly the same, because they're not. the goal of one is to be happy in this life. And the goal of Buddhism is, all lives, all time, all being, And methods also are different, the goal of the methods. But I don't think that Mahayana Buddhism is saying ignore anything, especially if you're going to do calm abiding and latang. It's all about be aware of everything in there, all the pieces, your fear, your pain, your joy. So, does that
It
help?
does, and I like what you're saying. It's what I tend to agree to. I think what stood out for me was that he said it in such a way, maybe that's how I saw it, was that he said it in such a way that it was like very quick, and it was like Western psychology is actually wrong in having you go into it.
Yeah.
It's actually a misconception that you believe you need to go into it. Like you feel guilty about something, you say it, you say a prayer, and then you move on. And it's like you do the thing. It's just like people get way too caught up in the pain of it, suffering.
Yeah, and
which
I
is the
have
exact
heard
opposite.
more teachers than him say that, but I think what they're pointing at is the extreme of what I just pointed out. Therapy that solidifies the suffering, makes it your identity.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and that can happen with folks.
Absolutely.
So when they say that, that's how I always interpret that. Like they're saying, don't get trapped over there. And then, of course, we have the whole thing culturally that in the traditional Asian cultures, the individual is so much less psychologically, they don't go to therapy, They might go to some community person that helps, but that's a very Western thing, this thing we do. And it's based on, we're very individual, we're very psychological. Like the most potent story I've ever heard that illustrates this, and my teacher was there, Thupten Chidran was there. It was a group with the Dalai Lama, small group of Western therapists, actually. And he was wanting to hear about Western therapy and, Buddhism, etc. And at one point, one of the therapists just became very vulnerable and said, I do all this work with people, but in my heart, I don't like myself. I feel like this, just the way that we're very critical of ourselves, we're very, hard on ourselves. We've been criticized as children, So he revealed that, and the Dalai Lama was like, really? You look like this really wonderful person, and you're smart, and you've got a professional degree, and you're studying Buddhism. How can you feel bad about yourself? And then other people all went, oh, we all feel that. and at some, along a continuum, some of them deeply and some less. But do you resonate with this? You feel bad about yourself? Bad, like inadequate, like criticizing self, like always need to be improved.
Not good enough.
Yeah.
Yes, but I consciously try to avoid it.
Yeah. No, I know, but we're talking about we have it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So everyone, he was going, do you have that? Do you have that? And they were all going like that. And he was blown away because he didn't see that amongst his Tibetan people. They would never say that.
Well, they live in a different society.
Well, that's my point.
That society that doesn't
That's
have
my point.
the capitalist system that you're living in now just really hints on the individuality.
Yeah.
So you as an individual separated from a whole.
Yeah.
So instead in the Eastern society, before, now I don't know how it is now, it's more, you're more part of a whole. And in Italy too, you were part of a whole 100 years ago. So.
And it doesn't mean you don't have emotional problems.
No, that's right.
But you have maybe other kind of problems, but it's not this individual psychological thing that I often recommend that book, The Imperfection of Wisdom. No, The Wisdom of Imperfection. The Wisdom of Imperfection. It's a wonderful book about a young man that in the 70s went to India and Tibet and worked on all close to llamas, did all the stuff, went into caves, did all this stuff, and went pretty crazy and came out and became a therapist. But while he was there trying to talk, he learned Tibetan very well. Trying to talk to the llamas, the cultural differences were like this. He was bringing up his individual psychological Western problems, and they were like,
What are you talking
we don't get what your problem is. And so his isolation was part of why. So he wrote a book, Rob Priest, and he's got more than one, and it's a great book about that juxtaposition that you're talking about right there, and the difficulties. Laura.
Sorry, I'm really like impatient. Anyway, oh yeah, Lama Yeshe, I wanted to say like talked on this, and I'm gonna do a really bad job, but he was like saying how like the Western psyche is different from the Tibetan and that, and he was saying it was a fault, and it had to do with the type of psychological sensitivity. I want to say it had like highly complex, like little slights from people. We work extra hard because there's all these little things to manage and keep up and respond to. And he was saying it was a kind of sensitivity that weighs us down and is hard to get over, I think he was implying. And the impression that it made on me was, yeah, the Tibetan was much more cut and dry, like simpler. Not in a bad way, but in that way, what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, you know, for example, Geshe Kelsang Damdul, one of my other teachers who escaped from Tibet, very young child, his mother basically carried him across the mountains. And then he went into the horrible monastery. I mean, it was, the Tibetans had nothing when they got to India, and the Indians weren't sure how, they weren't exactly welcoming them. They tolerated them because it was very political football for China, India, Tibet, and it still is, you know, hard for India to totally support the Tibetans there because China really pressures them. So, so it's a very complex thing. But Geshe Kelsang, we were saying to him, we don't know your personal story, you know. We've been taught by you for a long time. We don't know your personal story. And he would just say, what good is that? What good is I tell my personal story? And then we just urged him and urged him. And it was the most amazing thing about his mother carrying him across. And then he was in is that what it's called, Buxar? Buxar was it was a camp that was set up for the Tibetans when they arrived. And I'll tell you how bad it was. He said, we really loved you Americans. And we said, how'd you know American? He said, you sent Spam. That was our food. Now you can imagine, I mean, canned Spam. And he literally said Spam. And he was saying that helped keep them alive. And they, again, what saved them was the thing Louisa was referring to, the community. But many of them died. They went to work on roads in the hot sun, and they died because they were used to the high altitudes. They were used to meat and dairy, and suddenly they're in India eating dal and white rice. I mean, this was really hard for them. Yeah.
But when they do tell their story, I bet you 9 times out of 10 they didn't talk about the deep psychological stuff. It's like
not at all
happened. And it's like, what? You know, who are you?
Yeah, good point. Good point. He never, you know, like we might. Oh, it was, you know, it was just like you said, straight on. My mom carried me across. I always loved my mom for that. Then we were here. We almost starved. Lots of people died. And he was still kind of like, why do you guys want to know this? This is just so personal, like, not so important. What's important is my practice. So it's just a different, cultural differences are meeting. And so that's part of what you're seeing when you see that. Yeah.
I want to propose that all we're talking about in all different situations is basically a lucky rabbit's foot. in all cultures will have the different version of the lucky rabbit's foot. And if you
What
really,
is lucky rabbit foot?
okay. You see, only some cultures actually
Yeah, in Japan, they say there's a rabbit on the moon, right? A rabbit in the moon, in the full moon, a rabbit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we say there's a man in the moon. They see a rabbit, and
Yeah,
when
we
I
do.
went and heard that, I
Yeah.
started seeing the rabbit. Yeah. Anyway,
Looks like a rabbit
lucky
person.
rabbit's foot.
But a lucky rabbit's foot is like some people would take a rabbit's foot and have it in their pocket for luck. You know, bring them good luck.
On a key
Good luck
chain.
charm.
It's
really
true.
Like the monkey paw story.
Yeah.
But what's the metaphor here?
It's the metaphor. It's
Yeah,
the metaphor.
where's he
It's
going?
But
this
what
thing
is the metaphor?
that in all cultures we have stuff that we believe in. This will
Yeah.
work this way.
Yeah.
And
It
there,
does.
sometimes when I hear people talk about very, very seriously about how bad spiritual bypassing is, that it actually sounds like, oh, you're upset that somebody is going through something in a different way than what you
Yeah.
think is the real way to go
Yeah.
through it.
That's true.
And I think there are ways to do stuff where you ignore stuff and you don't deal with stuff, and then you have to deal with it later, or you're always trapped by it. I think that's all. So I don't have a kind of a big issue about it one way or another. But if you can actually use the lucky rabbit's foot of shifting your mind to the cultivation of the four immeasurables, and you're actually in the cultivation of sympathetic joy, you actually just you set aside this, whatever it was. You actually are not trapped by it. When you actually, however it is that you find that you're not trapped, there's something's actually happening there. That's not, well, you didn't do it my way, therefore it's not real.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And like everybody has to do years of therapy, or everybody has to not do therapy, or everybody has to, we don't know. You know, you watch people and some of them are incredibly happy without doing that.
We were talking about this the other morning with Eric Fromme and different kinds of things, and in some cultures, a shaman can act, you have exorcisms,
somebody.
and people actually, they get out of what we would call kind of
PTSD.
some massive psychological break, some total breakdown. And I saw a show about Romania, where there are people who still very firmly believe in vampires. And they will actually go and dig up bodies of people that they have all agreed must be a vampire. And when they do certain things, then the person that's been afflicted by this actually gets better.
Yeah.
And the proof that they have for, well, you see, we dug him up and see all this red stuff coming out. He's getting out of the grave and going, biting people. There's physiological explanations for why there is red stuff around the mouth of a corpse. But they're convinced, and in the conviction, it actually works.
Yeah. The mind's the creator of everything. There we are.
Vampires.
We're back
so-
to the mind.
So there is something in it,
Mind creates
and
culture.
and I think there are things that there are kind of powers that we ascribe to certain roles in society, whether it's therapists or doctors or ministers or exorcists or whatever it is.
Or
and there-
gurus.
What's that?
Or gurus.
Or
Yeah,
gurus, yeah,
or gurus,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so there's something in that side of it. So I have a kind of a little softness about, well, this is the only real way to do it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
gets a little touchy. But I think that there is a reasonable critique in the kind of thing that you saw in some of the therapy, where it's like I can become kind of a professional full-time victim of my mental circumstances.
Yeah.
That looks
things
like,
that
well, you may overall feel in your life like you're really doing something about it,
Yeah.
and so you feel better in a certain way, but then you feel like, well, I don't really feel better. And so there's something in that
Yeah.
Because you feel like you've gone to the
Working
shrink for
with it,
20
yeah.
years now, and you're doing something about it. So, but on the other hand, what's actually happened is that you've kept on going to the shrink
You're
and talking
living
about
in
it
a
for 20
different
years.
trap. You were in trap A, now you're in trap B, you
Mhm.
know. And what springs the trap is so varied, so varied.
So
And what
Yes.
gets us out of the trap is also very
Yeah.
and very particular. And I think, and I,
Is
for all
particular?
the sound.
Oh, particular,
Yeah,
like
to-
varied and particular.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so I don't want to sound like sort of harsh about any particular way out.
No.
That is, I think.
So spiritual bypassing, I think I don't know if I'd come across that term before. I think I know what you mean, but a quick definition of that.
I'll give you the definition that I understand, but it's not the definition that people in the field would say. But it's
In the field of therapy, or
therapy.
Or in Buddhism. It's a term in Buddhism too.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
Well, modern.
in
Yeah, modern Buddhism,
modern
like
modern
Tara
Western.
Brach writes about
mo-
it.
modern-
Therapists
modern
who have
Western
come into
Buddhism.
Buddhism write about it. Yeah.
That you can engage in certain kinds of mental cultivations that induce states, and you can say this is a pleasant state, but when you get up off the cushion, you're still the same jerk that you always were.
And you think you're working on that. The spiritual bypass is every time you feel an emotion, you think right away of a Buddhist fix. So you're angry, but you don't actually own it, feel it, and go through it. You go, I'm filled with loving kindness. I'm going to send metta everywhere. And you do that every time. Well, you're never addressing what's really going on in there, and it can grow. That's the spiritual bypass. You use the four immeasurables or the
so
six
it sort of
perfections
comes down to you're
go
not really
around
paying
it.
attention to what's
Yeah, you're
going
not
on.
really
I
paying
feel like the word
attention.
avoidance is better than bypass.
You're not truly mindful. You
Right.
think you are,
Right.
but you're actually running away from
Right.
what's inside of you or what's going on. Let's not say inside of you, what goes on, you know. Yeah, it sounds like a nurse's solid thing. You
No.
do. Yeah.
I wanted to, it's very interesting, bringing in the dimension of culture and then bringing in the dimension of the methodology and the Dharma and how it might work. It might be a bypass, but it might work
Yeah.
instead
Yeah,
of therapy.
that's
I think
important.
bypass
and it
is
reminded me
fine,
of,
just avoidance. You know.
One little, this is sort of a side piece, but when Bo Kermshay was here at Lewis and Clark and in those teachings, it was a small point, but it really stuck with me that he was saying now, people, when something, some negative thing happens because of something you did, like people are always, we think of it as I made a mistake. I made the wrong decision. I did the wrong thing, and therefore this bad thing happened. And he explained that really the way to view it is that your karma is ripening. So the bad thing that happened was karma ripening, and it wasn't, and I just realized that made such a difference as to how I would view that then. Like, rather than, I did that stupid, if I wouldn't have gone there, then I wouldn't have hit that car because I would have, whatever. Or, the whole, there's always this whole going back about I made everything happen to myself.
Yeah.
And
I'm the only
he's
cause.
saying, like, and so if you viewed those things that happened as karma ripening, that would be a different thing that needed to be experienced or looked at or processed. That's quite
Opens it up.
And yet
and
karma,
it takes away some of this self-hatred.
And
The
we-
woe is me.
But
Yeah.
I did feel that Rinpoche was, I mean, it seemed like there's the 2 points, and, one of them was I don't remember it in detail enough at this point, but my sense of it was kind of more like don't dwell on,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
not helpful to just live back there and dwell on the things that happen that were negative. And then the other thing was, I think, like Zopa was saying, like kind of observing Westerners having a habit of beating themselves up like over the littlest things.
Yeah.
Like stop that.
But there's also the aspects
not
of the
helpful.
patterns that we have. So when you have a very strong pattern, it's really difficult just to
But
work
it
with
doesn't mean we can't. We can do
No,
it.
we can work
Yeah.
on it,
But it's hard.
But yeah, it is
Yeah.
serious. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's why you go,
Yeah.
at least within the society,
Yeah.
go to a therapist that
Mhm.
allows you to kind of get into that aspects and develop more awareness for it or experience it more with the help of somebody, because
And
sometimes
work
it's
through.
really strong.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not that you can do anything. So when it's very
Yeah.
strong, and I really like what Ken McLeod says, that you have to be on the edge, but not beyond the edge, because when you go beyond the edge, you're completely into the madness or whatever feeling that you
Yeah.
have, and so you reproduce it over time.
Yeah.
Instead, if you're on the edge, you kind of start experiencing it little by little, and then working on it and transforming it. But
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
he
think
seems
that's
to advocate, like what I've heard him teach is the idea that we can be carrying around things that we didn't sort of fully experience or fully appreciate at some point in the past, and that we somehow need to
Yeah.
experience that, and then we can move on.
He's
But
got
I
a
don't
great
know.
book called Wake Up to Your Life, which is another one of the psychology and Buddhist books that helps shed a lot of light on this. It's a big book, and it's
Okay.
hard to get through. Kim McLeod, Wake Up to Your Life.
It's a bunch of
And
lessons.
yeah, and yeah, he works more with emotion. And you said something, we're close to end, but you said something like, "Oh, the bypass is okay." It's not.
Spiritual bypass is
Yeah,
well.
yeah, it's considered that
But
you
it's the
have
avoidance
something
that's-
to work out, and you're bypassing working on it. That's what the bypass is. The bypass isn't like a good bypass, like,
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to get that
No, no,
clear.
Right.
It's not like, oh, there's a traffic jam and I'm bypassing it.
But in a way, there it is. I mean, if you're not avoiding the negative emotion,
Then you're not bypassing.
okay,
If you're seeing it and it's
Right.
transforming,
Right.
there's no bypass.
okay,
The bypass
Like
is
skipping
you're
a step.
not,
okay,
it starts showing and you go, I don't want to look at that. But
Right.
you're not even aware you're doing that.
right,
You think you are doing it. You say, I
Right.
apply metta. I'm applying metta
So-
now. Like
Right.
metta,
Right.
because
So
I don't
that's the
want to see what's
definition
going on
is-
in there.
Also, I've heard it called
Yeah.
spiritual materialism, or some. Is that the same kind of term, or is that something different?
I think that's a little
It's
different.
different.
Yeah,
Spiritual
we can talk
materialism
about
is-
that
is,
next time. That's a
right,
big
yeah,
topic.
something else. It's a fun
And we're
one.
out of time. That's a whole other big topic,
Mm-hmm.
which is very juicy. Thank you. Let's dedicate.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you. I just think that word transforming someone came up with right at the end is key. Like whether it's therapy or Buddhism or whatever, is the transformation occurring. When you bypass, the transformation's not
It's
occurring.
not occurring.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, good discussion.